Yes, no, maybe so?
Which Ian is which?
Ian de Moura is going to be on the right, and Ian Fish is on the left. Ian's, can you hear us?
I can.
There we go. All right. And you're coming in loud and clear. So welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having us.
So where are you guys coming in from tonight?
I am in Seattle proper, and Ian Fish is in the boonies of Seattle. I think he lives in a hut.
No, I'm down about like an hour and a half south in Olympia, the state's capital.
But with a very fine library, in any case. So how did you guys hear about the club?
Username.
Yeah, so...
Username, yeah.
My grandpa is a friend from Boy Scouts. I heard there were some Boy Scouts from our troop in the audience, so just a shout out to you. We've been in Boy Scouts, we've been in contact over the years, and he recently reached out to me to participate in this, and I'm very honored to be here. And the presentation would be complete without my colleague Ian Fish, so I brought him along for the ride.
Very nice. And how about you, Ian? Did you hear about from Ian Fish? Ian Fish.
Yeah, I heard about the Adventure Club about, I don't know, probably less than a week ago from Ian de Moura over there.
Right on.
He told me he was doing this and, that he would be pleased to have me join him.
Right on. Well, I guess let's start talking about the two of you. Ian de Moura, why don't we go first with you? So tell us a little bit about, what's your story? What's your adventure? How did we get to, the trip that we're going to talk about tonight?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I mentioned, Boy Scouts was a huge part of my life. Grant McComb and his brother Alex were friends with me and my brothers. Spent a lot of time in the Los Angeles wilderness just doing bike rides and hikes. We did a 2-week backpack trip in Belmont together, which was super fun. Got my bicycling merit badge. So for the Boy Scouts in the audience, get the bicycling merit badge. In high school, I did a lot of mountain biking, and then in college I raced road bikes. Did some triathlons, some road racing. And I wanted to go a little bit farther than just the 20 to 50-mile races that we were doing. And so when I saw that it was possible to bike across country, I knew that I wanted to do that.
All right, and then Ian Fish, what about you?
Well, similar to Ian de Moura, I also just grew up kind of going hiking, camping. I was not a Boy Scout, but I was a Cub Scout. So I was a little bit there.
Totally.
But also just doing a lot of backpacking and biking here, throughout high school and even in college, and then and for the biking, for the trip itself, I didn't really hear about it until about 2 weeks before Ian decided he was going to go. He called me up and said, "Hey, I'm doing this thing. You live kind of near the start, so you want to join me for a couple days?" And I said, "Yeah, sure, why not?" I was thinking, "Yeah, I'll go for a couple days, maybe across Oregon. That's about it." And then, the rest kind of just fell into place.
All right, and I want to talk about that. I really do. But let's back up a second. Let's talk about how you two met. So how did you all meet?
So there's a great story here, and I'll let Ian fill in some of the details. But Ian joined the university where I was going, Washington University, which is located not in Washington, D.C., but
or Washington State.
Or Washington State. But we were both in St. Louis, and we were doing an event where we were out in the Ozarks on a camping trip, and we were all gathering in the field to look at the stars, to do some stargazing. And as the group moved out to go into the field to look at the stars, Ian Fish turned to me and said, "Hey, I think it would be super funny if both of us ran into the woods, stayed there for a little while, and then when everyone's gathered and is stargazing and it's super peaceful, we just start making some crazy noises in the woods." And so that's exactly what we did. And we climbed into the woods, and everyone else went over. We're lying down, looking up at the stars, just super peaceful. And then we started breaking branches, making a little bit of noise. It was fantastic. It was fantastic.
That's great.
How did people react?
Go ahead.
No, sorry, go ahead. Didn't mean to cut you off.
No. And so our friends sort of like were kind of looking around, and we made a little bit more noise. They came a little bit closer. We made more noise. And the look of terror on their faces was fantastic.
So obviously a great first adventure to have together, but when did you start doing like the type of adventures that you would end up doing together?
Oh, no, when he says that I called him 2 weeks before, that is exactly what happened. I mean, in college, we would do some outdoorsy stuff or go for day hikes, but after college, we sort of lost contact. And when I had the idea to bike across country, it starts here in Seattle and in Oregon in the Pacific Northwest. And so really, I was like, do I know anybody up there? And went through Facebook and saw Ian Fish's name and sent him a Facebook message saying, hey, dude, do you want to bike across the country? I'm starting where you're starting. And the man signed up for it.
Fascinating. Okay. So I was going to ask the two of you about your preparation and what you did, but it sounds like there's only one of you to ask about that. So I guess let's start there. Ian de Moura, how did you prepare for this trip?
Yeah, great question. So no preparation. I knew that there was a route. So I had done a little bit of research. Again, really loved bikes in college. And I knew there was a route that was established across the country on bike. It's called the Trans-America Trail. Would really encourage anyone in the audience to look into it and to do it. And they have a map and they have a trail. And so I was like, I just want to do that. But my preparation involved buying a bicycle and a tent. I downloaded a packing list that I had from the Boy Scouts and filled up the bicycle. And then I flew to Astoria and figured that me and Ian could figure out the rest of it. And I think Ian's preparation was even less so. I think he dragged a bike out of his garage.
Oh, yeah.
Whatever he had.
Yeah.
So very little preparation was done.
And I know that there is a little bit of a friendly rivalry between the attention your two bikes got on the trip, so we'll get to that. But Ian Fish, how much kind of this sort of distance riding had you done prior to this trip?
I mean, not much, to be honest. I did a lot. I was more of a mountain biker than a road biker, first off. And like, even then, I wasn't a crazy mountain biker either. I did basic trails, nothing too technical. And I think the longest bike ride I'd ever been on before this trip was like 26 miles. And we shattered that the first day.
All right, and just to reconfirm, Ian de Moura, what was the longest bike ride you had done prior to this trip?
50 miles, and I
50
think we
miles.
broke that on the first day.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
All right, so here you are, superbly prepared. You start off,
Prepared.
yeah, on the trail in Seattle, and so what were those first couple legs of the journey like?
Well, they give
We
you
have
an
some
idea
pictures.
and I'll let Ian speak to some of the first bit of the ride, but to give an idea on how well prepared we were, in order to get a bicycle from my house in Los Angeles to Astoria, Oregon, you need to put it in a box to get it on the airplane. And in doing that, you need to disassemble the bicycle, right? I mean, this is pretty obvious. So I disassembled the bicycle, put it in the box, put it on the airplane, no problem. But when I got it off the airplane, Ian Fish arrived to pick me up at the airport at the same time. And so I was a little bit stressed out. I was in a new airport in a new place, and I put the bike together wrong. And I didn't realize this. And so on our first day of biking across the United States of America, my bike was assembled incorrectly. And on the first day of biking across country, something tripped up on it. I skidded out and destroyed the back rack on the bicycle.
Oh, bummer.
Yep.
So that is what preparation will do. So definitely a little bit more preparation than that. And true story, we went up to a guy and he was like, hey, I'll put a little zip tie on this bike rack, but that's all we can do. We don't have the parts. and then we rode the rest of the ride with a zip-tied bicycle.
That's amazing. So you're just having to check in on that every so often, just make sure the
Every so often, yeah, just make sure it's not gonna like an accident come off.
All right, and so Ian Fish, what were the first couple legs of the journey like for you?
Yeah, well, I mean, first day we stayed in some like sketchy trailer park that just had a bunch of, smelled like cat pee. But then the first day of actual riding, we set off and, you know, after dealing with Ian's thing, it wasn't too bad. Like we stayed in a much nicer spot. Then the second day we had was like much longer it was the longest ride I'd ever even considered doing. I think we did 70 miles the second day because we were like racing to get to a campsite. And then my knees started like aching, like I couldn't pedal. I had sharp shooting pains in my knees just from overuse because I was not used to this riding. And I think we had to stop like 3 separate times just because I couldn't bear pedaling. I just needed to sit and recover and stretch. And that kind of stretched out the whole trip. And so I think on the second day, we got into our campsite at like 10 o'clock at night. It was dark. Like we had no idea where we were going. And yeah, and I don't think that was the only time where we kind of faced a situation like that, but we managed.
Oh, we got there.
For sure. But so, okay, Ian Fish, you're dealing with all of the shooting pain in your knees. Like, how do you sort of find the strength to keep going? Like, where does that come from?
Well, I mean, basically, there just wasn't anywhere else to go. So it's, you know, I could sit here on the side of the road in the middle of nowhere, kind of by the Oregon coast, or I could keep going and we can have a place to stay. And so that's kind of what I did. And, you know, just basically pedaled one-legged the whole way. I really favored my left leg and was essentially pedaling with only one leg for half the day. And the other leg was just along for the ride.
It's just having a good time. So we have a picture pulled up here of Ian changing a tire on his bike. So what happened here? What's the backstory of this picture?
I think that was still in the first week. We were still in Oregon there. And I think that might have been my first flat that I got. And so we had ridden on a bit of a trail that was off the road. I don't even think it was even part of our path we were going. We were taking a little detour to see like a scenic, like overlook kind of area. And there were a lot of thorns. And so I must have ran over a thorn. I had a flat and I just needed to pull off and change it. And I think I only had one spare. And I had just these cheap little hybrid tires that I had bought from the bike store like the week previous.
So you had in fact bought new bike tires?
Yeah, I had in fact bought new bike tires because the old ones were threadbare and falling apart. So I didn't get good ones, but I did get some.
Okay. And then it just immediately went flat.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Just one thorn did it in.
Okay.
And that was not the first flat. Oh, that was not the last flat that I encountered.
So, in fact, here's another one. Here's another.
Yeah.
Yeah. So where was this
you'll
now?
Notice as we go through this presentation that the images of bike failure are all Ian's bike. Mine held up wonderfully. I got 2 flats the entire trip and no mechanical issues. So shout out to Trek for some engineering there. By Trek.
Yeah, bike track. All right. But that got made up for with the amount of attention that Ian Fish's bike would get, right?
Yes.
People were dapping it up all over.
I was riding an old Bridgestone MB3 mountain bike from the 90s. It was my dad's. Like he had ridden it to death. It was in the garage. And when I got the call from Ian, I'm like, oh, this is going to be great because this is going to be the perfect bike for it. It's, you know, steel frame, hardtail mountain bike. Just put some hybrid tires on there. It'll be perfect. My dad was psyched. He was vicariously living through me. And so every single bike store we stopped in, which is mostly because of me, to get new tires and
Right.
new inner tubes, like every single person complimented my bike. They're like, I had one of those when I was a kid. I've always wanted to like turn it into a touring bike. I never did. Here you are living my dream. And so it was pretty fun. And nobody commented on Ian's bike. They, it's
Not a
generic,
word.
it's basic, and nobody cares about it.
Not a word.
That's
Still
funny.
by Trek though.
So, okay, so talk us through the first sort of leg of your journey. You start off in Oregon, then you go to where next? Next couple states.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, originally the Transamerica Trail goes directly into Idaho from Oregon, from Eastern Oregon into Idaho. But when we were in Eastern Oregon and the day before we were supposed to travel into Idaho, we read about a major rock slide on the highway that we were supposed to be riding on in Idaho. And there was no way around this rock slide, at least to our knowledge, unless you go like 200 miles out of the way. So we decided to take a detour up into Washington, then over across the panhandle of Idaho.
Gotcha, okay.
And that was a mistake because that was not a fun ride. We were
Not a fun ride.
in the wind the whole way. It was not a nice path. There was like logging trucks zooming past us like an inch away. And then we met people later on who told us that there was a little, there actually was a detour. There's like a little truck that just took them right around the rock slide. It was no problem at all. So we did all that for nothing.
Well, so to the point you made about not having the best time with that experience, Ian de Moura, why don't you tell us about this picture that we've got pulled up right now? You look real pleased to be there.
Exceedingly pleased. Just having the time of my life. I'm from Los Angeles. It's beautiful and sunny every day. And I don't know if you guys can see, you guys are from Los Angeles too, I think. So in this picture, there's something called rain. It's like water droplets that come from the sky. I never experienced it before. And it's terrible. And when we crossed the Cascades, it was just raining the entire time. And Ian Fish was like, dude, it's way better to go in the rain because it will be cooler. And I was like, okay, I know nothing about rain. I'm sure it's better to cross the Cascades on bicycle in the rain, you know? There must
Makes
be an
sense.
advantage.
Yeah.
There is not. You should cross the Cascades when it's a nice sunny day. But yeah, it was super cold. It was super rainy. But this photo is from sort of right before we crossed the other side. And the minute that we crossed over, the sun came out, which was fantastic. And it was also a little bit of a turning point for me in the trip because I knew that Ian Fish had committed only for the state of Oregon. And we were so miserable on that climb that Ian Fish every hour or so was going, thank God I'm only doing Oregon. And I was like, dude, I cannot lose Ian Fish. Like, I need to sell this trip because I cannot lose Ian Fish. And when we crossed over into the Cascades, I heard Ian Fish say out loud, dude, I can go the whole way. And I was like, yes, I got it.
So real quick, you get to this point, how many miles is that?
Ooh, great question. 500?
So
Probably about, yeah.
Okay, so 500 miles, and the whole trip was how long again?
4,000.
Okay.
I think it was 4,600.
Oh, wow, okay. So 500 miles, you were locked in. You were ready to go.
I think I did the transition from going across Oregon to deciding, well, I got to at least make it to Yellowstone because that's, you know, got to go see Yellowstone. That's cool.
No doubt.
But I'll quit before Kansas.
Okay.
But, and then it just slowly, incrementally kind of grew from there. It's like, well, I made it this far. I might as well keep going. You know, I can't, you know, Ian is just, he's this scrawny little guy. He looks emaciated. Like, I don't think he can do it. He's not going to make it. He's not going to survive.
Yeah, and for the record, I did look emaciated, and no, I wouldn't have survived. So,
So Ian Fish was the muscle on this trip. That's what I'm hearing right now. Okay. Okay, so after Montana, or then we get to Montana, right? So Montana's right after that?
yeah.
And then we get into Yellowstone. And so what was it like riding through there? Because obviously Yellowstone, very beautiful. What was it like riding your bike through there?
When you ride from Yellowstone into the Grand Tetons, so you're in both parks, I mean, it's the most beautiful riding experience on earth. I mean, it's the most beautiful thing you've ever seen. It's awe-inspiring. I mean, it's almost difficult to describe because you're there and you're not in a car. And so you can just be there in it all, and it's just absolutely fantastic. Here are some photos from Tetons and Yellowstone. The entire thing is just unbelievably incredible.
Yeah.
And this is our muscle.
And then Ian, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no,
I was just going to ask Ian Fish, what was the experience of riding your bike like in contrast to doing the same trip in a car? Like, how did that change your perception?
Yeah, well, I mean, you feel a lot more kind of in tune to your environment. I feel like when I'm driving, a lot of the time I'm focusing right ahead of me on the road, I'm not really looking around. And here you don't really kind of have anything to do but look around and kind of feel like you're kind of part of the landscape and you're really kind of soaking it in. I feel like you meet a lot more people. I mean, and in Yellowstone especially, it's, we're seeing all this traffic and all these people trying to park and all these lines and people trying to find campsites. And here we are just rolling up to the little reserved hiker-biker campsites, have no problem camping wherever in the park, just going around to all the different sites. And it's like, it was easy. It's like, man, more people should be biking. Like, it was great.
For sure. And then, I know I should have asked this earlier, but what time of year was this?
Oh,
Over the summer.
Summer. Okay, so like, what was camping looking like?
Brought one tent. We just tented everywhere.
And did you take turns carrying the tent, or was one person responsible for the tent?
So if you saw from those previous photos of us lying in the lake, one of us had significantly more muscle mass than the other. So the tent gradually went from mostly carried by me to mostly carried by Ian Fish.
Yeah, I was tired of stopping waiting for him. But no, it was good because it was all during COVID too. So people were afraid to go out camping. And, so we thought, this is the perfect time to do this because nobody's going to be out. So we're going to be safer than everybody else, just out in the middle of nowhere, USA, all alone. And we were kind of right. Most of the campsites were half empty. The busiest kind of area was Yellowstone. And even then, I'm sure it was like pales in comparison to peak Yellowstone tourism.
Sure. Okay, so you get out of Yellowstone, you get into Colorado next. I'm trying to remember. I'm using my cheat sheet up here. I have a map next to me. So Colorado, and we do have pictures from Colorado, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's Colorado there. That was the kind of the highest point of the whole trek. That was kind of the mountain pass, kind of going up out of Breckenridge, and that was fun. That was a steep ride, feeling the thin air in your lungs.
I heard that this call was recorded and live streamed, and just for the record, I made it to the top first. So yeah, the highest point of our trip, I got there first. Just to throw that out there for the record.
This is all being recorded. It is noted by everyone here that you were the first at the top there, and that Ian Fish's bike had more problems. So this is all recorded. Yeah. All right. Perfect. So like one question that I had, I guess, was, did you guys have to adjust it all to the higher altitude? Like, what was that like?
Ian, the air was thinner. I don't know how Ian was feeling, but I definitely noticed that. I think we went kind of gradually enough that I didn't really notice any like major changes. Mm-hmm. But when you get that high, it's, you get into that lack of oxygen problem, which is the only thing I really noticed.
Right.
And the cold.
Sure. Yeah, even in summertime, it can get pretty cold, right? Mm-hmm. So you come down from the mountains, and then you hit Kansas. And so what's going on? What's going on in this picture? Explain this, Graham, for us.
Oh man, dude, Kansas is crazy, dude. It's so flat, and we were doing this in the summer, and as we progressed, it got hotter and hotter, and as we got lower in altitude, it got hotter and hotter too. And so by the time I'm standing here, it's like, I mean, it must have been like 95 to 100 degrees, full humidity, and just the feeling of relief of pouring water over yourself is immense. It was so hot in Kansas.
And there's also no shade in Kansas because there are no trees.
No
Just
trees.
9 hours in the sun riding our bikes.
So was supply ever a problem? Did you ever have an issue where you ran out of food or you ran out of water or anything like that on this trip?
Actually, yes. We only had food issues once. Most of the trails that we went through small towns in America. But when we got to Idaho, there is water in all of the campsites that we visited, but apparently it hadn't been checked by the U.S. Forestry Department in a couple of weeks. So there was a sign on the water in Idaho that said, "Hey, drink at your own risk." Okay. So we had to bum water in Idaho and go to like RVs and ask for water. But after that, we were pretty good. And then unfortunately, there is a lack of nutrition in a lot of Appalachia. And so later on in the trip, we started to not run out of food, but run out of high quality food.
Gotcha.
In Appalachia, but most of the time now.
So what are you trying to eat normally? Ian Fish? What are you trying to eat?
As many calories as possible. We were probably burning about 5,000 calories a day,
Wow.
and we were still losing weight. I think like in Colorado, we weighed ourselves for the first time, and we were shocked because I think we had both lost about 35 pounds, and we thought we were eating and Ian especially, I started off a bit heavier, and then Ian was already skinny to begin with. But we kind of upped our caloric intake after that.
Right.
But we were still just eating entire pizzas in one sitting. One of our go-to meals was instant mashed potatoes and canned chicken. That was a great one.
Interesting. Okay, so how many of your meals were eaten at a restaurant or eating establishment versus just on the road?
It would depend on where we were. Obviously, in Yellowstone, there's fewer restaurants.
Sure.
Once we crossed, it's kind of funny if you see a light map of the United States. We experienced that biking across the country. So when you're on the West Coast, there's a lot of people, and so we did eat out at restaurants because we had them, and then we ate less and less because we camped out more in sort of the West. When we crossed the line into Missouri, we had a greater access to places and people and places to be. Yeah, once you cross the Missouri line, there's more civilization. Mm-hmm. So we ate at a lot of diners because you could order tons of food, pizza and not pizza, but pancakes and sausages and that kind of thing.
And I still remember, I think on the first day, we stopped and got food in Oregon, and we went to a restaurant. And I remember Ian telling me, it's all right, we can't do this every day because we need to be mindful of how much money we're spending. We don't want to run out of money on this trip, and eating out is expensive. But then by the end, we did not care one single bit about how much money we were spending. It's we want food and we want it now.
So, I had a really good question. Oh yeah. So you're in Kansas. You've been on this ride now for a while. Have you started to get a sense of who is better at what kind of terrain, in what kind of environment? Are you picking up sort of specialties about each other or yourselves? What kind of learning is happening here on a personal level?
Yeah, that's a great question too. I mean, a lot of it is size, right? Across Kansas, Ian Fish is just a bigger guy. You can't see it from sitting down, but I'm at 5'8", and I think Ian Fish is 6'1". And so just the leverage on the bike, he's much faster. So anything that is straight, he's much faster, and then going down hills, just gravity can pull him down. Mm-hmm. So just much faster on the bike, except when we were climbing up to 11,000 feet. And it pays to be only 5'8" and 132 pounds, in which case that's a huge advantage. And Ian made it to the top first. But yeah, a lot of it comes down to weight, because we're getting pretty small. So I was good on the uphills, and Ian Fish was good on everything else.
And then, actually, I'll hold that question for a little bit later. So after Kansas, what comes next then? What came next for
Missouri,
you?
the picture is
Missouri. Yeah. And I remember being so excited to get to Missouri. I mean, as you can see, I'm leaping for joy in this picture. And this was right after we probably had the worst Mexican food we ever ate and decided we had gone far enough east that we can no longer count on the Mexican food to be good. And I remember looking over to Ian and like telling him, it's like, Ian, don't let me move to Missouri because I think I'm falling in love with it. But it's just because it's not Kansas. I don't want to live here, but I think I might move here. But I did not move to Missouri, thank God. But
Yeah, Mexican food in Kansas is a bold choice, so I respect. Yeah, I respect the bravery.
The woman walking out told us it was really good and really authentic.
Okay, all right, well.
It was not.
And then Missouri, by contrast, perhaps looked maybe a little bit better than Kansas anyway.
Yeah.
So where is this picture taken? Can you see?
This is in Jefferson City, which is the capital of Missouri. So fun fact, there is a protected bike lane that crosses the entire state of Missouri.
Wow.
So we got off city roads. We were biking through the Ozarks on a protected bike lane. It's super, super nice. And it leads to Jefferson City, the capital. And Jefferson City is kind of a fun town because you're in these woods. You can't really see anything. And then the Capitol building, this huge Greco-Roman dome, comes out of the forest. So it's pretty impressive architecturally.
Sure.
To kind of be biking in the forest and then see Jefferson City.
And so you've got to be closing in on the end now. So do you think I've only got this much to go, or do you think, oh my God, I'm almost done? Why don't I just stop here? Like, what's going through your head in this last part of the ride? Ian Fish, let's start with you.
Oh, sorry. We had kind of, since we both went to school in St. Louis, we were kind of excited about like the prospect of seeing people for the first time in a long, like actually meeting friends, which we hadn't really done to like an excessive capacity before now. And so that was kind of like, that got us through Missouri. And then once we got there, we were like joined by a friend for a couple days. And so that kind of just gave us a bit of a spurt to kind of close out, at least in my opinion.
Sure.
For sure.
And Ian de Moura, are you kind of feeling the same way, or like what's going through your head as you get through Missouri?
Yeah, absolutely. I had promised Ian Fish that we'd meet many, many friends along the way who would join us and that we would be some sort of large ragtag group of people. That turned out not to be true. And I've actually wound up in sales as my profession. True story. So when we did find, some friends and some people to ride with us, it helps a lot.
Sure. And so to that, can we go back one, Phoebe? Who are these lovely people that you have with you here? Can you see?
Yeah, I see him. So these are actually Patrick. Ian Fish actually lived with Patrick, the gentleman in green, while he was at school. And then Abigail here is a dear friend of ours from college. And we stayed with Patrick for a few days.
Nice. And then moving on to the next picture, who is this that joined you? And also, go ahead.
No, that's Kendall. She also went to school with us at WashU, and she joined us for the last couple days, and I think only a couple days. I think we only camped once with her, and then she was picked up when we crossed over into Illinois.
How was it having a third person with you? How did that change the dynamic?
Adding a beautiful blonde to any trip is always a positive. That's never a negative.
Yeah. Oh, and she braided my hair, which was nice because it was, unwashed and needed a bit of taming. I don't know if you can quite see in the picture. I got my little like rat tail braid hanging down.
The fact, Ian, that you're not currently married to this woman is a shame, but
And so moving on. Oh, yes. Okay. I was waiting for this one. So a big part of this trip, obviously, is the people that you met along the way. You talked a little bit about that in Yellowstone, but you included a picture of this gentleman here. Tell us about Bob. Tell us about, meeting him and that experience. Ian de Moura.
Yeah, sure. So before Yellowstone, so sort of going back, about 15 miles before Yellowstone, Ian Fish's chain broke, and we had to walk for about 15 miles into Yellowstone. Yeah, there's the chain break photo. So we had a little bit of experience with bike issues. Actually, I think that one was like 7 miles. So we had to walk a little bit, not too much of an issue. But when we crossed into Virginia, we were in the middle of nowhere because the entire trip is in the middle of nowhere. And Ian Fish back sprocket just didn't work. So he would pedal and the bike wouldn't move. So again, if you haven't purchased a Trek, you should purchase a Trek. But his Briscoe bike just didn't work. And we were legitimately 15 miles from the next small town.
Brutal.
And so there was a moment there where we were sitting in a park, like, what do we do? Because like 15 miles is a pretty significant distance on foot.
Sure.
Not insurmountable, but fairly significant. And it was another 50 miles to the next bike shop. And 50 miles on foot is an adventure in and of itself. So we wanted to do one adventure at a time. And so our first move was to get to the city. And when we got there, we called the cops. And the local sheriff picked us up and drove us to the local church. True story. And then the local church just happened to have a bike hostel for us where we could stay, which was fantastic, stocked with like food and shelter, which was huge.
That's great.
And then we called the church and we're like, hey, we're like at this point 40 miles away from help. Is there anything you can do? And so they sent this guy, Bob. And Bob, I don't know, he looks, what do you think, Ian, like a 90?
Oh, he was firmly in his like late 80s. He borrowed a truck that we like loaded our bikes in. We're driving around. He's, pointing out all of his friends' farms. Like, oh, my buddy, he runs that farm over there. And as he's like kind of veering into the other lane, and we're like, Bob, pay attention to the road. He stopped and he decided, I'm a little hungry. Do you guys want some food? And he stopped and bought us some lunch, and then dropped us off and then went on his merry way.
Well, shout out, Bob. If you're watching this, you are appreciated.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess I'd love to take a second and stop and ask, like, how much of this was just getting from point A to point B, and how much time did you make for detours and more interesting, like, diversions? Ian Fish.
Oh, yeah. Well, we did it in about like 90 days. And I mean, there are people who do this trek in like under 40. So we were not racing by any stretch of the imagination.
Sure.
And we took about I think one rest day every week. And then around some of the nicer sites like Yellowstone, Grand Teton, we took a few extra days. I think we met one of Ian de Moura's mom's like childhood friend in Wyoming, stayed with her for a couple days, stayed a few extra days around like St. Louis. But yeah, we tended to not do more than like 1 or 2 days without making progress. And that was only like kind of at the end of the week, sort of.
Also on the
yeah.
road, as you drive, there's these little historical markers. In Los Angeles, there's a little bit fewer of them, but as you sort of drive out, you'll see these historical markers. They'll be for like silly things like first log cabin that, Lewis and Clark sat in, these sorts of things.
We saw Abe Lincoln's birthplace, well, supposed.
Yeah.
Wow.
We saw his birthplace. We saw the birthplace of the Nez Perce tribe. We saw the birthplace of the Mormons. I mean, it was crazy. We saw all of it. It was kind of a fun historical journey.
So were these days off planned, or was it just kind of like whenever you both sort of agreed to take a day off, you would?
I mean, we didn't plan the trip, so we certainly didn't plan the days in the trip, yeah.
Well, it's nice there's consistency all the way through then.
Yeah, consistency all the way through.
So what was like the most fun day off that you took? Like what was the most fun diversion, like most surprising diversion that you took? Whoever has the answer first can go.
I mean, it has to be Yellowstone Grand Tetons.
Yeah.
I mean, that was unbelievable. Unbelievable. And we spent several days, and I met a friend from high school there. We saw the bison that are behind us. Yeah, we met this girl randomly on Facebook, texted me and said, hey, I know you from high school. I'm in Grand Tetons. So we got some drinks with her friends around a fire. It was super fun. It's just incredible. It's incredible. Also, the bison are huge, and they have these signs that say, do not give a bison a hug. And you think, like, why do they have these signs? Who would ever want to give a bison a hug? When you're on a bicycle only 200 feet from them, you want to give them a hug. Like, they're huge, they're cuddly, it's amazing. Mm-hmm. The whole thing was great.
Yeah, I mean, if they weren't meant to be hugged, why do they look like that?
Exactly. That's my point exactly.
Yeah, that's my attitude. So
yeah, we actually had a third member of our trip, but he only made it to Yellowstone because he hugged the bison. So
yeah, we don't talk about him.
We'll pour one out. That part won't be recorded. We'll edit that out. All right.
We appreciate that.
Yeah. So coming up on the end of your trip, is Virginia must be the last state, right? Because now you're on the coast.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, like, talk us through like what's going through your head as you're making that final stretch to the beach, because you ended on the beach, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So what's going through your head as you're making that trip? Ian de Moura.
Sure. So I think we were 50 miles from the beach. We can't see the beach. And Ian Fish, if you haven't noticed in the last 45 minutes of the discussion, is one of the chillest men alive, right? Like, he's super even keeled. He honestly, in the face of adversity, super just super chill guy, easy to bike cross country with. If you want a tip and pointer on how to bike cross country, just pick Ian Fish. But so we had been pretty gregarious, if you will. And I'll always remember we got to like the final city before the beach, and we wanted to visit an old Confederate cemetery to just go take a look at it, just like we had visited all of the other historical places. And we got in a huge debate about which street to take to the cemetery. And I knew at that moment, if we're fighting over the best street to take to a cemetery to see old dead Confederates, that the trip's got to end sometime soon. The camaraderie's falling apart here. So we just picked a street, and that final 15 miles was just ecstatic. When you can finally feel the ocean air and you can see it, and you're getting closer and closer. It's fantastic.
Was there ever any racing that went on between you? Like, did you ever be like, I'll bet I can beat you to the next town?
No, I would have won. But no,
except up the Rockies, yes.
Yeah, except for any climbs. I think the closest we did to any actual racing was there were a few storms we had to outrun. There was one in Kentucky where we had the hurricanes that were down in the Gulf kind of made their way inland and kind of turned into tropical storms. And so as we were riding, I think this was the same day we saw Lincoln's birthplace. we see like kind of news alerts about storm warnings and kind of like, be on the lookout for bad weather. And we're riding down, we're like about to head into like the bourbon capital of the world. And we see this big looming swirling cloud on the horizon. And I look over to Ian, I'm like, I've never seen a tornado before, but I think that might be a tornado. We better bust our butts to like get off the road before that hits us. But spoiler, it was not a tornado. It was just a big, heavy, swirling rain cloud. And we did not outrun it. It hit us, and we got drenched in like about 15 seconds. We went from completely dry to like soaked to the bone and had to ride into town.
Well, here I was thinking you would have both had a first. Ian de Moura, rain for you. Still don't know what that is. And tornado for Ian Fish. But so, okay, dead Confederates notwithstanding, you make it to the beach, and I think we have a picture of that. There you are.
Yeah. Looking glorious and pasty white with our tan lines.
Yeah, and quite emaciated.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it is really, how much weight do you, Ian Fish, how much weight do you think you lost from start to finish?
I think when we started, I weighed probably about like 220.
Okay.
And when we finished, I was around like 185.
Wow.
And that's like the skinniest I've been since like sophomore year in high school.
Yeah. And then how about you, Ian de Moura?
I dropped from 165 to 139.
Whoa. That's,
Yeah. I was a small boy.
Yeah, and and we both had our scraggly beards. I think when we were staying on the ACT, they gave us trail names. And me with my long beard and hair, I think I was Jesus Rides, because I guess I looked like Jesus. And Ian was, I'll kill you tomorrow, and the guy said, because he thinks he'll literally might kill him tomorrow. He looked homeless.
I would have gone with, have you ever seen like oh gosh, like any of the new Star Wars, that one Empire general played like Domhnall Gleeson? That's who you look like.
My aunt actually gave me the action figure of that guy as a joke, as a prank. Yeah. General Hux, I think his name is.
Yeah.
So what did you do once you got to the end? How did you celebrate?
We ate some delicious crab cakes.
Love it.
And we stayed in a hotel. So I think our third hotel of the trip. The first hotel was when we first started in Eugene, Oregon. And that was just because there was no campsites and we were it was too early on to just camp underneath the bridge. And then the second one was when we got out of Kansas just to celebrate, and we wanted to Macy. And the third one, we stayed in a nice, like, Best Western Plus, just to celebrate being done. And that bed was the nicest hotel bed I think I've ever slept on.
That's an ad for Best Western Plus.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that being the case, was safety ever a concern for you? Did you ever worry about your stuff getting taken or physical harm to you?
No. A lot of the places we were like backcountry America. So, I mean, in rural America, everything's pretty safe. There was an issue in Appalachia. Like, Appalachia is really, really poor.
Right.
And we were chased by dogs a couple of times. We didn't feel unsafe, but it was also like unwelcome. It wasn't like the friendliest place in the world. But other than that, we were pretty safe. I
think it was, yeah. Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, I think like for me, the most like threatening aspect were like the hazards and like, big logging trucks and the cars zooming past us. Anytime anybody honked a horn, which most people did it friendly, they thought they were giving us a little friendly honk of encouragement as we're climbing up a mountain pass. But every single honk, I nearly veered off into the road or into a ditch and had like a little mini heart attack. So never honk at a cyclist, whether you're mad at them or not, because it is not fun.
Sure.
And near the end, yeah, and then the dogs, having to yell at the dogs or kick them away from biting you.
And not to get into politics, but if you pass a house that has the Confederate flag, the Don't Tread on Me flag, the MAGA flag, the America flag, and a gun flag, it's just a vibe, It's just a vibe of Appalachia.
Absolutely. So I'm really interested to spend the last couple minutes we have in talking about the sort of how you supported each other on the road. So I guess Ian de Moura, starting with you, what was like sort of the lowest point of the trip for you? Like mentally, what was the most challenging part?
I mean, it's either crossing the Cascades, that photo where I'm like soaking wet. I was like truly miserable. Like the most miserable that I've ever been in my life. And then crossing Kansas also, I mean, it was just brutal because it's super hot and super long days and there's nothing to look at. So those are definitely the two lowest points.
Sure. And how did you support each other through those times?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I gave some words of encouragement to Ian as he was there. I complimented on his nice little safety vest. I told him, "Don't worry, it'll get better. The sun will come out." But no, I mean, we basically just kind of stayed with each other. If somebody needed to stop because something was hurting or they needed a rest, the other of us, the other one stopped with them. Nobody was left behind. There were a few times, like when I was dealing with my knee thing on that second day and I almost quit, Ian stopped and let me stretch. Ian dealt with his own sort of overuse injuries in his knees when we were going through Colorado. And I think we just decided to call it quits one day, about like 10 miles into our ride and just camp early. And so it was basically just kind of letting each other like kind of do their thing and not leave anybody behind. And man.
Mm-hmm. And so Ian Fish, I feel like you alluded to it, but what was the sort of most challenging moment for you in that ride?
Well, I mean, that second day I was nearly on the verge of quitting. I was heavily considering it. Mm-hmm. And then also when my bike broke in Virginia, like that rear hub, and just trying to figure out how am I going to get 60 miles to get this fixed. There's no way I'm going to be able to walk this. And the kind of sort of struggle we had to do to decide, well, when we call up Bob, like, is this cheating? Because he's going to drive us 60 miles. Or, because we were really proud of the fact that we had, done this all under our own power. But I think we decided that, there's no point in trying to, this is not a bragging rights kind of thing. We just needed to get the bike fixed.
Mm-hmm. And so, how much of this was sort of a pride thing? How much of this was, I have to do this under my own power versus I can take a break, I can get help, how much, what was the balance of that? How did you juggle that? Ian de Moura.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I wanted to cross the country on bicycle, so I think it was just assumed that we would do it on our own power. And then that was kind of a super hard decision because the first time his bike broke, we did walk, and then to make that realization that no, we just can't walk 50 miles. There's nothing we can do. Okay. Was kind of a hard decision. But most of the time, if you're on your bicycle, because we didn't have a time limit, we could just stop. We didn't need to hitchhike or anything. And to kind of circle back to the encouragement question, there's an incredible power of not admitting how miserable you are. So I have a clear memory of crossing the Cascades, and I only heard Ian Fish complain once we had already crossed. We never once admitted the fact that we were just incredibly miserable. There's a real power in that, There's a real, we're just not going to say it, We know it. We're all experiencing it together, but we're just not going to say it out loud.
Was it ever a surprise to you? Like you got through something, you heard the other complain, and you were just like, oh, I thought you were just being stoic, but you were just as miserable as I was.
Oh, no, we knew.
Yeah, we knew.
I mean, you can see it for the photo, we knew.
Yeah. Yeah, fair. You really can't tell with that one. What advice would you give to someone looking to do either the same trip as you or a similar one?
Buy a truck.
No, I don't be too daunted with it, because we, as we've been saying, we didn't really have a bunch of training. Like our first couple weeks was our training. Like even if you start out going 10 miles a day, like you're doing it. Like we met an older couple that when we were in 50s, and they were doing it, and they had done it all under their own power as well. We've met people of all different, body sizes and shapes and ages and athletic ability who were doing the same thing we were doing. I think I bought most of my gear on Amazon. So it's no matter, it's just time, really. It's time and willpower are the biggest two things. Like anybody can do it. I don't think we're very special or uber athletes for have accomplished this. It's willpower and determination.
And how about you, Ian de Moura?
I mean, same thing. It's time. We got super fortunate that the pandemic was super hard for everyone, and it kind of gave us an opportunity to do this that we wouldn't otherwise have, because the number one thing is time. Because we had the opportunity to, like Ian said, train during the ride, get a little bit stronger, go a little bit faster as we went. So just determination. Clearly, planning, not that important.
It helps. It definitely would have helped.
Don't tell Grant McComb that I said that planning is not important. And for the Boy Scouts in the room, preparation is key. But for biking across country, there's an exception.
You heard it here first, folks. All right. What is a piece of gear that you absolutely that you would say you absolutely need if you're going to do this trip?
A bicycle, a trek bike.
I hadn't thought of that one.
No, the bike's a big one, and kind of having the right type of bike is a big one. So having a heavy duty steel frame bike, no suspension, and having the kind of mountain bike gearing with the little granny gears for the climbs is very helpful. But even that, you can make do with other things. I think the biggest thing is at least just having a tent and a place to stay. But even then, there are they were called credit card bikers, which they are on the fast road bikes, and they're doing the same trek, and they just have a credit card in their back pocket, and they just pay for everything along the way. So it's just depends on what you're looking to get out of it, and how much money you're willing to spend.
Sure. Well, guys, that's all the questions I have. Is there anything else that you would feel remiss if we left tonight and we didn't talk about?
Well, I'd love to know if you've gone on any bike trips.
Me? I think the longest I've ever done is from my house in the Pasadena area, for those of you who know, down to the Queen Mary in Long Beach.
That was my ride. That was my first 50-mile ride.
Really? Okay. Very nice. Yeah, right down
higher, but I've done that ride. That's super fun.
Yeah, no, it really was. It was a great ride, and we went down. I think we went down the Wash, basically. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. No. That's how I got my merit badge. Yeah,
it's a great ride. All right. Well, if you guys are okay with it, I'd love to open it up to questions from our live audience here at the club. So if you have a question for the gentleman, raise your hand. Lance will come around with the mic.
Yeah, this is Lance Miller. I'm member 1222. I'm going to ask the first question. I'm just curious, how much first aid gear did you carry with you for blisters or repairs? Did you have any with you, or was that even an issue?
Blood jelly.
Yeah.
Ooh, great question. Were we carrying a kit?
I don't think we were carrying an actual kit. We had like some Band-Aids and we had some Advil. And then I think that was pretty much it, because, you know, if there were any major issues, which we thankfully didn't really encounter many, there were like any like little corner stops, because it was rural civilization, but it was still civilization. So we could always just stop and pick stuff up if a real emergency occurred.
Rich Abley, 1172. How many flat tires total did each of you experience?
Two.
I lost count. I probably had like 10 or something.
Wow.
Then around Missouri, I bought beefier tires, like for my back wheel that had all the weight on it. I bought a beefier tire. Like the tires that I had previously were like $30 tires, and this one was like a $60, really thick, heavy duty tire. And it worked great. Didn't have a single flat from then on out. So invest in beefy, sturdy tires.
Okay, Peter Jensen, 1101. Actually, two questions. Did you use the adventure cycling maps?
Yes.
And, pardon?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Great, aren't they?
Not officially though.
Yeah, we sort of stole them, but yeah.
We didn't pay for them. We looked up the kind of like highlight kind of stops, like the cities that it goes through, and then we used Google Maps. So we did it the cheap way.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you did it.
Yeah,
Congratulations. Also, can you talk a little bit about dehydration and your challenges with hydration?
Yeah, great question. Kansas was a big deal because it was so hot. So we definitely needed to carry a lot of water and fill up water constantly. I would kind of change the question a little bit and say that, at least for me, food was more of an issue than water, because we were always getting rained on and there was always water available. But for some of those longer rides, I would like run out of granola bar and just like, you would crash. And I would literally have to bike another 5 miles to catch up to Ian to get food. So for me, hunger was more intense than thirst, but I don't know how it was for you, Ian.
Yeah, no, I'd say that's probably valid from my experience as well. We both were carrying a lot of water with many places to fill up. I think the only time we were low on water was, as you mentioned, in Kansas, and I remember like being really thankful that the place we were staying had like a well that we could fill up our water with, and it tasted so good. But the food was a big one. I remember there was one time where you were like really struggling and all we had were marshmallows, and you really didn't want to eat the marshmallow. You're like, no, I can't just eat the marshmallow. I'm like, Ian, you're crashing, you need sugar, just eat like 5 marshmallows. And you did, and you perked right up. Should have listened to me from the get-go, but you waited like 3 miles. But,
Rich Mayfield, member 1211. In terms of like the quality, or I guess how nice the ride was, what was the best section of road and what was the worst section that you absolutely would never ride again?
That section is either because it's so beautiful, the section in Yellowstone, because it's really, really stunningly beautiful. If you can only do part of the ride, do that part. But in terms of quality, it's the bike ride that went across Missouri, because it was a protected bike lane the whole way. And that helps a lot. The worst road is we use Google Maps to get us around a section, and it took us on some farming dirt back roads.
Yeah.
Like across the country on farming dirt back roads.
Yeah, that was our only section off of the like official trail where we were trying to go around the rock slide, and it was a mistake. So stick to the official routes, because it knows much better than Google.
We also missed a turn in Montana, and we also had to take some sort of dirt USA forest roads. And it is at night in the middle of nowhere with antelope on the hills, and you're on a dirt road. Not good. Not good. Stay away. It's not what you're looking for.
So David McAlexander, 1199, did you have to do that key part of expedition planning, how you're going to get your morning coffee, and how do you do that economically on a long trip solo? And the other question is, you talked about that shooting knee pain in day 2. How did you go from shooting knee pain, can't ride, to, oh yeah, let's press on another 4,400 miles? How much time did it take to recover, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, for the coffee, we, Folgers, like instant, freeze-dried coffee crystals. That was our bread and butter.
And when I would go to diners, because we were eating so much Folgers, or drinking so much Folgers instant coffee, we would order like 6 cups of coffee at a diner. So whenever we got coffee, we just went for it.
Yeah.
But yeah, Ian, more about your knee.
Yes, my knee. We stayed in like a KOA that night, so it was like, it was fancy. And I bought some Advil and just took a bunch of Advil, drank a bunch of water, and I don't even think we did a full day's rest, if I'm remembering correctly. I think
didn't. You just kept riding. It was pretty.
Yeah, I just had the rest at the campsite and had all of the Advil, and then I ended up just kind of slowly recovering. And I think you kind of had more lingering issues because you didn't, I think you just kind of powered through it more. When I had my knee pain, I kind of stopped or really heavily favored my other leg. And I think you just kind of gradually did it. And so that's the one that kind of led to us having to stop early. And that one, we just took an extra day, and then you were fine.
Yeah.
This is Lance Miller again with 1222. 2 questions. One is, the distance across the U.S. is about 2,800 miles. You said you did about 4,600, which that's almost there and back. And I was curious how that occurred. And I was also curious, what type of speed did you typically, and I understand going over the Cascades, you're not going to be clipping along, but once you're we'll say into the plains, what type of speed did you typically travel at?
Yeah, so I'll answer the distance question. Every time we tell this story, the distance increases. So next year, I think we're going to be claiming to have biked 6,000 miles. No, but in answer to your question, we took a diagonal route. So if you take a look at the U.S., because we started in Astoria and went to Virginia, it's a diagonal instead of straight across, so that adds quite a few miles. And then we did a lot of zigzagging. But the actual distance, I'll pull up in just a second so that you can get an actual number, because you're right, it is almost double. But it's because of that diagonal.
Mm-hmm. Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, that's all you.
Well, Ian Fish, while he's looking for that,
Sorry.
has this trip inspired you to do any more? What's the next adventure for you?
Yeah, I don't know. I had a big debate with myself on whether I was gonna, become a full-on cyclist or if I was never gonna touch my bike again after this trip. But I've done some kind of smaller rides, just short little 50, 60 milers. But I mean, I don't know. I have pondered kind of doing the Canada to Mexico ride or biking in Europe. A lot of people told us that biking in Europe is so much better than biking in the U.S., but
Sure.
No concrete plans, but maybe at some point in the future. My brother really wants to do stuff with me. He's jealous that he didn't come along even though I invited him. So maybe something in the future, maybe some mountaineering or something, who knows. But.
Sure. All right, Ian, back to you.
Yeah, absolutely. The total distance, 4,204 miles. So that's quite a bit of zigzagging.
And what type of speed were you typically traveling at?
Speed less than 15 miles per hour. We were going slow.
Okay.
Yeah, probably between 10 to 14.
Yeah, we're carrying weight and just taking our time.
Yeah, I think our fastest, there was like a downhill stretch. It was a pretty long downhill stretch. And we rode past one of those like, speed radar signs. And I think I got to like 35 miles an hour, and I was really happy because it was like higher than the speed limit. But
We got one more.
Did you have a tailwind across Kansas? Or headwind?
Yeah, so you bike from west to east because the tailwinds usually favor you. So more often than not, we got a tailwind. In Kansas, it wasn't that big of a deal. I don't remember winds being that huge of a deal. We did catch an incredible tailwind in Colorado, though. We literally had a thunderstorm come up behind us, and we were cooking. We were going like 26 to 30 miles per hour catching that storm. It was pretty wild, and then we got soaked to the bone. But we moved pretty fast with that tailwind. But in Kansas specifically, I mean, it was days on, days off. It wasn't a huge deal.
Well, Ian, thank you so very much for being with us. Stick around for a little bit after the outro. We want to, present you with your certificate as much as we can. And for the folks on YouTube, if you liked what you saw here tonight, please think about subscribing to the channel and liking the video. It helps us out a ton. And if you're in LA, why not come down? We do this every